Hey, Jason here. I'm back. Today we review the Carisma 4XS. Let's get going. Okay, let's talk Carisma 4XS. Before we get started on the Buggy itself, let's talk a little bit about Carisma. Carisma is actually a manufacturer based in Hong Kong that's really focused on ready-to-run toys and RC cars for quite a while, but they've really decided to focus their attention on building a full-fledged race car. The owner is just into racing. And so this is really their first attempt at creating a full-fledged, completely competitive RC car, this Carisma 4XS. So let me take a few minutes, we'll run through the car together, and then we'll get on with the performance characteristics and the rest of the review. So let's go take a look at the car. Okay, so it comes with this asymmetrical body. I actually kind of like the body. It's a little bit boxy, but I've actually liked it quite a bit. Some people love it, some people hate it. I've got a lot of different feedback from it online. But let's get that thing out of the way. You can see that the car basically, obviously you can see that I'm running a Savox 1258 TG titanium gear servo, an HPI Flux 5.5 turn motor with a matching speedo, and these are basically, let's just be honest, these are Hobbywing products. It's a Hobbywing 3.1 speedo and a Hobbywing motor. That's an RC Juice Pack battery, 2-cell, and you can run this car. You can run this car in a variety of configurations. You can turn this around so that you can run saddles. You can run it in the shorty. You can run the servo on one side or the other, depending on how you set up the steering rack. But let's go ahead and talk about the front of the car first. You'll see here that the car has aluminum suspension mounts. It has these really nice clamping hexes, which I really like. The sway bar actually is a little different. Traditionally, the sway bar is just one piece that goes all the way through, but this one isn't that way. This one has this pivot, and it actually has bars that you can put in here. And you can see that I just disconnected one side to add steering to the car. The kit comes with orange springs. These are Carisma springs, orange in the front, yellow in the back, and you can put your own, you put the shrink wrap that comes in the kit on them. Aluminum shock bodies with aluminum shock caps, and of course a carbon fiber shock tower. It has gear diffs inside, and I'll show you some pictures of the gear diffs. The gear diffs are actually quite a bit different than the gear diffs that you normally build. They actually have 3 planetary gears, as you can see right here in this picture. And while building the kit, the build actually went really well. It went off without a hitch. There were no missing pieces or anything like that. But getting these C-clips on the diffs, oh man. My first one probably took me like 10 minutes. But once you kind of get a knack for it, it's not too bad. But man, it's a pain in the butt, but it's really the only way to hold the diff hold the outdrive in the diff if you're gonna run this kind of unique 3 planetary gear setup. So, all right, back to the car. So you can see, you saw the suspension hangers, aluminum shocks and shock caps, clamping hexes. Of course, I've already talked about the electronics. It has this really nice steering rack. I really like this steering rack. It's super clean. There's a little bit of play in it, but not much. Just, you can tell that there was some serious thought that went into this car. It has a really nice sliding motor mount. It has a center diff. It has a center diff that you can use, or it actually has this optional center slipper, which is really nice. This car, you can just tell when you open the box that this is a real effort. This isn't like some half-hearted attempt at a race car. This is a company that really wanted to create a real race car to compete in today's market. This is one continuous top plate, and this is actually just a little wire guide that I never ended up using. That way, if you want to run your speedo up here, you can just guide the wires back to the motor without having it interfere with the slipper. I kind of think it'd be nice to maybe put a cover on this at some point in time, kind of like the 8-scale buggies do, like the Mugans and stuff like that. It's obviously not needed, but it would be nice. Okay, getting back here to the back of the buggy, you see it has this gnarly wing mount. This wing is actually super durable. I mean, listen to this. It's a really thick Lexan. It's actually taken a whole bunch of crashes and it's still in great shape. Its mounting system is super durable. It's obviously got the 4 screws with the aluminum clamps. Really nice. You get the same thing. I probably didn't mention this yet, but you can see that this car actually has spring steel turnbuckles, spring steel drive shafts, which are really nice. The shock towers are like 4 millimeters thick. They're really thick. Of course, the same aluminum suspension hangers in the back that you had in the front. The wheelbase on this car tended to be quite a bit longer than some of the other cars I had, like my Hot Bodies car, like almost a ½ inch. So that's why I ended up moving the arms all the way forward. I basically wanted the car to turn in really hard and rotate a little bit more aggressively, and then have a little bit more rear grip coming out of the corner. You know, a shorter car just transfers weight more aggressively. One thing that's quite a bit different, so let me show you this. Clearly they've seen other companies like Hot Bodies. The way Hot Bodies uses a really soft arm, and then they add the carbon plate to make it more durable. They've added this carbon plate, but they did 2 things differently. Well, they did 3 things differently, really. Number 1, the carbon plate is on the bottom of the arm, not on the top. Number two, they've used a much thicker screw, much heavier duty screw. And the arms are actually a much stiffer material. So that's just those things. And then of course, check this out. They used a reverse gull-wing profile. Now this isn't something that I've really seen before. I know that companies like Durango had talked about using flatter arms to improve ground clearance, but I haven't seen too many people use the reverse gull-wing thing. In fact, as far as I'm aware, when you see a normal gull-wing arm that has a profile like this, it's really designed to actually lower the suspension package and get a lower CG. So I'm not exactly sure if they were looking to control CG, create ground clearance, exactly what they wanted to do. But I can tell you that the arms are pretty rigid, and when you put those plates in there, they are really, really rigid. Okay, so that's about it. We went over the car. We talked about the gear diffs, the center diff and the slipper option, obviously the carbon one-piece top plate, the steering system, the spring steel turnbuckles and drive shafts, the nice motor mount, the modular sway bar system, and the shocks themselves. So that's about it. Okay, so I just took you through the car. Let's talk a little bit about the build itself. The build actually went really, really well. The kit was packaged well, meaning organized. The instruction manual was relatively clear. The diagrams were really good. A couple of things to note. In my kit, some of the bags that were sealed up to hold the fasteners, they weren't sealed all the way across, so some of the fasteners kind of got out and kind of got mixed in with some of the other parts bags. It really wasn't a big deal because when I build a kit, or every time I build a new kit, I either use a caliper or a scale to make sure that I'm putting the right size screw in the right hole. You definitely wouldn't want to put a screw that's too long or too short in the wrong hole because you could either damage something or strip something out, and that's obviously no fun when building a kit. As far as like the component quality and fit and finish, it was all very, very good. The only part of the kit that I struggled with and for the whole build were the diffs. There's a little C-clip, as you can see here, that goes over and holds the sun gear onto the outdrive once it goes through the diff case. And when you're putting these on the actual sun gears that are on like the diff gear, the gear side of the diff, it's really not too hard. But when you're trying to get some needle nose pliers down into the diff cup to actually clip that thing on, it is really a pain in the butt. But once you get past that, everything else is pretty much smooth sailing. And at the end of the day, I think it's probably a worthwhile sacrifice because the diffs are really smooth. Other kits that you build and they actually have the cross pins that kind of key into each other, sometimes the diffs aren't shimmed right or they don't feel super smooth. But the way these diffs are designed, it's actually really smooth right from the very moment you bolt them together. So even though it's a pain in the butt to build, it's probably worthwhile after the build is done. So build, very good. Getting the C-clips on the diffs, pain in the butt, but once you get the hang of it, it's not a big deal. Let's talk performance. Out of the box, this kit comes with 5-hole pistons, and basically for a US style track, which is kind of like a supercross style track that's usually very smooth and has very big jumps, these really aren't the pistons you want. So out of the box, the car didn't land really good. It didn't corner super great. I mean, you could definitely get the car around as long as it was on the right tires, but it wasn't super smooth, it wasn't super fast, it didn't land super good. I ended up making some changes. I ended up putting 2-hole by 1.6 pistons in the car, and instantaneously the car landed 10 times better. I mean, the car landed really well. You could tell that it wasn't kind of dumping onto the front and rear end. I ended up making some setup changes, playing with the sway bars and the arm positions and things like that, and the car just continued to get better. So I would say that out of the box, landing, meh. Put some good pistons in it, very good. In the air, a lot of these cars that have drivetrains that run down the length of the chassis that, you know, spin like in a transverse fashion, a lot of times these cars really tend to, they don't pitch super aggressively, but they roll really aggressively. And I don't know if it's these diffs are a little bit heavier or if there's something else going on that I'm missing, but this car was actually really stable in flight. I mean, you could turn the wheel, you could lock the front wheels out while in flight, and it really didn't whip overly aggressive. So I guess some people might not like that, but I liked it because it just the car is a little bit more confidence inspiring in the air, and you just can't get the car out of shape as badly as some of the other cars that I've driven. So I would say landing out of the box, meh. Put some good pistons in it, very good. Jumping, very good, very stable. And which brings us over to like acceleration and braking. With the gear diffs, this car accelerates and brakes very, very good. I mean, it's got a lot of rip. In fact, there were even times with the center diff that the car was pulling wheelies on the track when there were some high traction, some of the high traction sections and stuff like that. And obviously braking is very good. Cornering out of the box, I felt like the car was for the most part, it was consistent, but it really wasn't in and out of the corner super fast. The car is quite a bit longer, almost like a half an inch longer than some of the other cars, which is why I ended up shortening the wheelbase, which made a huge difference. But out of the box, I thought the car cornered good, but not great. Like, it was a little bit slow going in, and sometimes it would waggle coming out, but I ended up pulling off the front sway bar. Once I changed the pistons, I pulled off the front sway bar. I moved the rear hubs forward, and I think I went in on the tower, both front and rear, if I remember correctly. And lo and behold, the car became a whole nother animal. It turned in hard. As soon as the car was pointed in the direction you wanted it to go, you could just yank on the throttle and it would just get right off the corner really, really well. So there's no question that the box setup probably isn't perfect for this car, at least not here in the United States. But the car is definitely very much capable of being set up to go very, very fast. So there it is. We talked about jumping, landing, acceleration, braking, and cornering. Keep in mind, a lot of these kits that come from overseas, where the bigger part of their market is overseas, the setups that they put in the box really aren't designed for tracks the way we run them here in the United States. So if you're overseas or you're in a super bumpy track that doesn't have very big jumps, then this car may be set up absolutely flawless for you right out of the box. I just don't know because I don't race on those surfaces. But just know that the car is very much tunable, and it has enough tunability built into the platform that you can make it work here on these medium to high bike clay surfaces here in the United States. Let's talk durability. Overall, this car was actually pretty darn durable. I definitely did have some breakages. And the real Achilles heel to this car, if you ask me, is the rear hub. And let me show you what I'm talking about. This car really only has one Achilles heel that I could find. It's the rear hub. You can see that the bearing comes almost right to the edge of the plastic, and it just really isn't super thick, so it really isn't super durable. I ended up breaking two of these. One after I got ran over by a slash, and the second one, I just landed the car dirty on a big triple. It just kind of came down sideways and snapped. Other than the rear hub, I think the car is actually really durable. When I say durable, I don't necessarily mean unbreakable. Like, if, for instance, I broke the front arm when I landed a triple and just blasted one of my friends, and it actually just popped the screw out, but I put a new screw in the arm and was able to continue on racing. I didn't even realize that I had actually fractured the front arm because I was able to drive the car away. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, I think that's really what we want. When I think of durability, I don't necessarily think that a car should be unbreakable, because I think that if we built these cars to be completely unbreakable, they probably wouldn't have the driving characteristics we really want out of these cars, right? I mean, if this car weighed 10 pounds as a 10 scale four-wheel buggy, nobody would want to drive it, but I'm sure it would be durable as hell, right? So when I say durable, what I mean is that it can take a hard hit and keep on going and finish the race. Even if you have to limp it, or even if it's got some damage going on, like I fractured the front arm, but it's still finished, you just take it back to the pits, you put a new front arm on it, and you get going. At least it didn't saw the front arm off when it's completely missing, right? So overall, I would say the durability is good, not great. Once they fix that rear hub, I actually talked to the owner of the company, Ivan, and he actually said to me, he's like, hey, look, how are things going? And I said, look, it's going good, but I broke two rear hubs. And he said, look, what needs to happen? I said, I really think that the hubs need to be quite a bit thicker. And he said, no problem, we're changing the mold. And so that was really encouraging to me, because they clearly are making a serious effort to make the best product they possibly can. And considering this buggy is the first attempt, I'm not picking on it. I think it's a good kit. It has its flaws like any other kit. The main flaw being that rear hub needs to be quite a bit thicker than it is, but they're clearly changing the molds now. So anyways, long story short, durability, good, not great. If they can get that rear hub fixed, I think that the durability will be even better. And that's that. So that's my durability section. Okay, let's talk about complaints. What are my complaints about the Carisma 4XS buggy? I don't really have many complaints. There's a few things I think could use a little bit of attention. Obviously, we've already discussed the rear hubs. The rear hubs need to be beefed up, but they're already working on that, or at least that's what the owner told me, and I believe him. So that would be the first thing. The second thing that I think that I would work on in this car really is the steering rack. I didn't really see a lot of options for playing with Ackerman. Now, I know that not very many people actually play with Ackerman, but it would be nice if you actually could change it. And right now, there's just no adjustability on that. And last but not least, the shock pistons. The shock shafts, the distance between the E-clips isn't quite big enough to get an associated Kyosho or TLR piston on there. So when I ended up wanting to do a piston change, I would have either had to glue up all the holes in the stock pistons, which I did not do, What I ended up doing is finding some other shock shafts that worked. Here is a picture of the 2 different part numbers that I used. I wish I had a caliper. I didn't measure it like I should. I measured it, but I didn't write it down. I think I ended up having to take out 1 limiter in the front of the Buggy to use these shock shafts. And I think I added 1 limiter in the back of the Buggy to use the shock shafts. But I was able to get the car super, super close. In fact, I think I matched everything within a half a millimeter or so of what it originally was. And then I was able to put on other shock pistons. But so those are really my 3 gripes. I would say change the distance between E-clips on the shock shafts so that we can use other manufacturer shock pistons, beef up the hubs, and maybe give us some Ackerman adjustments in the steering rack itself. So that's it. Those are my 3 gripes. That's all I really have to say. And let's get on with value. Okay, let's get on with value. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you know that I really feel like there are 2 sides to the whole value coin, right? You have the value of what you pay versus what you get in the box, the metals and the plastics, and then you have like the environment, the whole global experience of owning a kit. Well, right now, it's kind of tough. Like, if this car had been out for 3 or 4 years and there really wasn't any support, I would be hard on it. I'd say, hey, look, it's hard to jump on this bandwagon when there really isn't a great big network of drivers, setup sheets, just all that kind of stuff. But since the company's just starting out, I'm going to cut them a little slack. But before we get into that, let's talk about what's in the box. At the time of shooting this video, I'm not exactly sure what the street price is going to be. Somewhere between $400 and $450 from what I understand. That's US dollars. And just to put this in perspective, the Hot Bodies car is $429, and if you just want to put nothing but carbon arm plates on it, that's another $50. And if you want to add aluminum shock caps, that's a little bit more money. And so there are some upgrades going on there. This car comes out of the box with an amazing aluminum steering rack that's super dialed, gear diffs, a center slipper, carbon arm plates, all that stuff. So if the price does end up being right in the $400 to $450 range, I think it's a really good bargain. I think that the fit and finish is nice, the quality's nice, and you just get a lot for your money. But when you go over to the global side of things, they obviously just aren't there yet, but that's because they've just released this kit, right? It's just making it into the markets now at the time you're probably watching this video, or at least on the date this video is being uploaded. So the value is really good on one side and it's really lacking on the other, but I think that's because it's going to take time. I think that if Carisma hustles and they get some guys running the car, they get some good setups, obviously any car that comes out of any first attempt is going to need some refinement over time. You learn so much more as you have more people around the world running your car in different race conditions and different surfaces with different skill levels. So overall, I'd say the value is good, but I can't call it great because they don't have that big network. Like I said, we're cutting them a little bit of slack, but still, they've got to get the global experience dialed, right? You've got to be able to offer setups and offer part support and get this thing distributed and make it easy so that when people need parts all over the world, they can get them. So that's how I feel about the value. I think what you get in the box is awesome, but the global thing's lacking, but we're cutting them some slack because obviously it takes time. Okay, let's talk conclusion. At the end of the day, what do I think? I like it. I think it's a good kit. I think that the fit and finish is nice. I think that they're doing some innovating. They're doing some things I don't really understand, like the reverse gull wing arms. I'm not a physics major. I'm not a mechanical engineer, and so I don't understand what the exact purpose of the reverse gull wing arms are. But I like the fact that they're clearly learning from the market. Adding the carbon arm plates, the center diff and center slipper. You kind of get these gut feelings when you open the box and you build these kits. And my gut feeling is that the guys over at Carisma, they want to deliver a super high-end product, and they want to give a great amount of value. The carbon arm plates, the center diff, the center slipper, the aluminum shocks and shock caps, and all the carbon fiber, they're giving it a go, and I respect that. I think it's a good product. I think that as they expand and get more drivers and a bigger support network and more distribution, I think that this car has the ability to really be a competitive player in the four-wheel drive buggy market. If they can get a two-wheel drive buggy into the market so that they have both of the primary classes across the world covered, I think that'll make them an even more dangerous competitor to the big dogs, right? The Associateds and TLRs and Kyoshos. The car has been really good for me. I'm actually really comfortable with it just the way it is. It's fast enough for me to absolutely compete at a club level. I think that I could probably take it to like a JBRL and do pretty good with it. But at the end of the day, the top level pros, the Mayfields, Tessmans, Cavalieris, Dakota Fens, those guys drive at a super, super high level, obviously far higher than my driving ability. So while the car works really good for me, it would really be nice to see if Carisma can get a paid pro on staff and get this car out here and compete against the biggest guys to prove to the world that it can compete on the grandest stage, right, at the highest levels. So overall, I like it. I like what those guys are doing at Carisma. I think that you get a great value, and I think the build was good. Like I said, it needs some refinements. The hubs clearly are definitely, the hubs just weren't engineered strong enough, and it is what it is. It was a mistake. It was an oversight. Hopefully they'll change the molds like they said they would. Not being able to put different pistons on the car, that's definitely a pain in the butt, especially because I kind of thought that was an industry standard. The piston that comes in the Carisma kit's a little bit thin. And then the Ackerman thing on the steering rack. But overall, I have a very good impression. I like the kit. If you're wondering, should you buy one? If you're one of those guys that likes to run something that's a little bit different, you've seen this video and you like the car, I wouldn't hesitate from buying one at all. But keep this in mind. If you're one of those guys that travels, if you're going to drive 5 or 6 hours to a race, and you end up getting there and you break the car and you can't replace it or fix it or repair it, that's really going to be a bummer. So I would say right now, make your decision wisely. If you're a hardcore racer that travels a lot, this might not be the best kit, but if you're one of those guys that just likes to go to the track, and if you end up breaking it, you can fix it a few days later, then this is absolutely a very good kit. So hope you guys enjoyed watching this video just as much as I enjoyed making it, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. Yeah. Yep, that too. Yeah, that was a bummer too when the slash ran me over. But luckily, I drove away from almost every one of those crashes.
It's a fine China. 13.2. 18.4. 12.6. 12.2. Look at it. You thought?
I just want to say thanks again for watching my videos. I appreciate you guys watching. I post a lot of stuff on social media like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, stuff like that. So if you want to catch up with me, I'll post this stuff up for you. And you can come on over, add me as a friend, follow me on Instagram, and you'll be able to see things that just don't make it to YouTube. Again, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.